continuing education sessions. And so at this point, I would like to invite our continuing education manager, Trista Zamani, to introduce the first session. Trista.
Thanks, Chad. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Oh, I didn't think I'd be nervous, but now I am. So it's good to see you all, and welcome to our virtual attendees. I know you see a lot of me. I don't always see you on Zoom, so please come and say hello. I'm hiding in the AV station in the back, working with the AV crew. So thank you for what you guys do over there. We have some great content over the next couple days, and that's all thanks to our Continuing Education Liaison Committee. I get to meet with them and pick their brain for topic ideas and presenter suggestions, so I couldn't do what I do without the help of Zoe Stevens, Hilda Dupre, Christy Martin, Jackie Tate, and Akash Sablog. So thank you very much for your support. It's greatly appreciated. Continuing education credits, you don't have to log them in the app anymore. There's been a memo sent out numerous times, I think, from the society. You self-report all your CE credits now. So just go in there. If you have questions, ask Marnie. She can direct you on how to do that. So moving on to our first session of the day, we have an expert professional panel from questions that were submitted ahead of time, and I'll ask our panel to come up here now and get started. And I'll slowly start introducing them as they walk up here. So Pablo Rodriguez, who will be facilitating this session, brings more than 25 years of experience in the legal technology industry, having held progressively senior positions at Thomson Reuters and serving as a strategic advisor to Clio. He has significant expertise in market insights, strategy development, financial and operational management, and go-to-market strategy and customer experience. Pablo joined Dye & Durham in January 2025 and has played a pivotal role in advancing our customers' first initiative and aligning our business objectives. As President of Canada, he oversees the entire Canadian business, including regional sales, partnerships, and marketing. He previously served as Chief Strategy Officer and was responsible for developing and leading Dye & Durham's strategic vision, ensuring that it aligns with the overall business goals and market opportunities. Additionally, he oversaw the implementation of strategic initiatives and monitored our progress against objectives as we entered a new era of organic growth for the company. I'm speaking on behalf of Dye & Durham, it looks like, which involves less M&A and more product integration and development. So over to you, Pablo, and thank you to our panelists for being here.
Thank you very much, Trista. I think we all need to shift a little bit in terms of our thought. We're just talking politics. Now we're going to shift over to business. As we think a little bit about building solid notary practices, one area of topic for education is really the business side of managing notary practices. So I think it's very appropriate that we start off the continuing education session with running a business, and you all run small businesses and mid-sized businesses, and so this session is really focused around those business functions: acquiring customers, attracting, acquiring, identifying new customers, launching new business lines, managing staff and all of the challenges relating to hiring and firing staff, how to grow a practice profitably, and of course, how to manage all those taxes and the financial side of managing practices. So we have a great panel here, and we're really going to be exploring marketing, sales, finance, HR, tax-related issues. And as Trista indicated, this panel is really grounded on questions that you have submitted. So we're going to barrel through about 20 questions that you have submitted. We'll have a nice discussion among some of them, and we'll hopefully reserve a bit of time at the end for further questions. So maybe we can start with Richard, and Richard can introduce himself, and then we'll go through the rest of the panel.
Thanks very much. Can everybody hear me okay? So I'm Richard Johnson. I'm a co-founder and partner with Ascent Employment Law. I'm passionate about what I do. I love workplace law. Call me crazy, but I think it's such a human field. So I've been doing that for the last 19 years or so. And I'll have an opportunity to chat with you some more this afternoon at the round table. But yeah, we take a very human approach to our practice. We're values-centered, accountable, and we have a very defined set of clients that we work for years on end. So very relationships focused, and it's just an honor to see some friendly faces that I recognize, and then meet some more this weekend.
Fantastic. And Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mark Smiklis. I am founder and digital strategist at Intersection Digital. So we are a small Vancouver-based digital marketing agency. So we've done work with BCNA for 10 plus years now, helping manage social, and we also are working with individual notaries as well. So we've sort of have a fair bit of experience with some of the challenges that notaries face with their marketing and some of their digital strategies.
Fantastic. Jeremy?
Is it on? Okay. Well, good morning. I'm Jeremy Anderson. I'm both a notary public and a chartered professional accountant. So prior to being commissioned as a notary 4 years ago, I worked for about 20 years as a chartered professional accountant. Started my career in public practice and then kind of wound my way around through private industry. And when I was commissioned as a notary a few years ago, I started practicing again as a chartered professional accountant.
Fantastic. So a notary and a CPA, so he will be able to speak our language here. Keith?
Hi, my name is Keith Moore. I'm the Regional Director for the Account Management team here in British Columbia. I have to say, this is actually my first panel, so bear with me, but it's been an absolute pleasure seeing everybody. I think this is about my 15th BCNA. It's lovely to see everybody, and I think working with the notaries obviously is a passion of mine because I went across the country and now I'm back again, so you have to put up with me for a wee bit longer, but yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So we are going to start off, and if we can advance the slide. So we're going to start off a little bit in terms of the legal side, and again, this question was raised around handling conflict and performance issues without raising a great deal of legal risk. Richard, would you like to take this?
I would love to, and we have about 45 minutes a question, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so in terms of conflict in the workplace, yeah, this is an all too familiar issue that no matter what kind of industry we're in, we face, and it stems from a whole bunch of different things. So the first starting point that I would recommend, and again, taking a very practical approach, start off on the footing that you're setting the rules when you hire. So to the extent that you can, have an employment agreement in place that sets the parameters, the rules of the game. Because down the road, when you're sitting there a year into employment and somebody's acting out of turn, what do you have to hold them accountable to, if not a written document? So it's really important to have things in your contract that are fundamental in terms of the respectful behavior, conduct, professional standards, keeping up with what they need to be doing from a notarial point of view in accordance with the advancement of the profession. Number two is wait and see is not generally an option. So when you do have discord in the workplace between either management and an employee, or between peers, or between perhaps a client and one of your employees, you're going to want to move on that quickly and not sit on it. All employers in the province of BC have to have a bullying and harassment policy as of 2013. I know we're all compliant. No show of hands if you're not. But you'll also have that as a touchstone. You'll be able to go to your employee and say, these are the standards we hold ourselves to, in addition to your values as a company. So I think those are really, really important things. And then hold your folks accountable. Do not let things linger. No matter what they're going through, accountability is always going to be a touchstone. And those are a few things. I don't want to talk too much, but there's a teaser. We'll talk later.
That's great. So we can sort of extend into managing employees. And the next question is really around confidentiality, client confidentiality. But how do we help manage employees in context with client confidentiality?
I think in any sort of legal profession, that's a great question, because in any sort of legal profession, we get people who often come to us trained. And that's theoretical training in a lot of cases. We assume on our new hires that they're just going to get solicitor-client privilege, any of the privilege that relates to us and our clients. They don't. So I strongly recommend, in addition to what I just said about setting expectations, have an onboarding process that explicitly talks about that obligation to keep client information safe and protected and used only for business purposes. Make sure that you've got safeguards on client information if people are working remotely or even for periods of time, and they may have documents in and out of the office, or they're transporting things electronically to and from accounts. Have a safeguard for that, and then a process where you can get all that stuff back at the end of the relationship. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we're dovetailing two things, and that is our professional code of conduct, and then we obviously have the, I say obviously, sorry. Maybe it's not obvious, but we've got the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner that governs privacy and private information in the province. Make sure you're looking at their standards. Most of us are governed by PIPA, Personal Information Protection Act. You can put that into your materials and make sure you're covering off both what you need to do from a professional standpoint and under PIPA.
Fantastic. So speaking of compliance, we're going to shift gears from employment compliance to tax compliance. And so we had a question around how a notary office can stay compliant with CRA rules while preparing for growth. Chairman?
So I can offer, I guess, a few pieces of advice on that. The first would be, unless you feel 100% comfortable doing the work yourself, don't try. So surround yourself by good employees and good advisors who can keep you out of trouble. Right? So get a good bookkeeper who knows what they're doing, find a good accountant, and sorry, what am I trying to say? Don't try to do the work yourself, I guess, is the fundamental thing, right? The second thing is don't take overly aggressive tax positions. So all pieces of tax legislation have some sort of anti-avoidance provision in them that basically say that the government or the taxation authority, whether it's the CRA or whether it's the Minister of Finance, they can deem a transaction to be offside irrespective of whether it's strictly speaking compliant with the rules or not. And so oftentimes when I'm kind of counseling people on this, the response that I get from them is, well, if the CRA calls, I'll just tell them, whatever the answer or explanation is. What a lot of people don't understand is that the CRA can take whatever position they want, and the onus isn't on them to defend their position. The onus is on you to prove that they're wrong and to prove that you're right. And so kind of practically where we see people kind of run into trouble is for things like meals and entertainment expenses, which as you can imagine are subject to abuse. Medical expenses, donations are common areas where CRA is going to want to see receipts. And then a common area where I see people take aggressive positions is with respect to business travel, and in particular, trying to claim business travel or travel to and from work as a business expense. And it's not, that's a personal expense. And then kind of along that line is, develop systems and processes that are scalable with your business. So, likely something that is going to be digital and set up in a way where you can easily organize and name documents so you can retrieve them when the need arises. And I say that because in my career, I've been audited by just about everybody that you can imagine. And what I've taken from that experience is that you should always be audit ready. And the time to get audit ready is the very first time that you touch any document. So make sure you get it saved in a place and in a way that you can retrieve it when the time comes. Because, let's be honest, there's never a good time to be audited, but invariably when the auditor comes knocking, it's going to be at a time that is not going to be convenient for you. So, to the extent that you can get yourself ready in advance and be able to quickly find that information, that's going to take the pressure off you at a time and in a situation that's already kind of inherently stressful. And then the last thing I guess I would say is kind of picking up what Pablo said off the top, which is if your exit strategy is to sell your notary practice, then you need to have something to sell. And so you need to treat your practice like it's a business, because it is. And also look at it through the eyes of an investor. So when you're selling a notary practice, generally speaking, what you're selling is goodwill. right? So it's going to be your brand recognition, your reputation, maybe your customer base. But if someone is looking at buying your notary practice and valuing that goodwill, and they need to come in and either establish systems and processes or clean up the ones you've got, then that's going to have an impact on the value of the transaction.
That's fantastic. Jeremy, you anticipated the next question, but maybe we could drill into it a little bit further. For some reason, some of the notaries want to understand how does CRA allow alcohol purchases as business expenses?
Great question. Good question.
Very appropriate for this weekend, isn't it? But I guess more generally speaking, maybe you could talk a little bit more about where you draw the line, what's aggressive, what's not, some common areas where maybe people push things a little bit too far.
So my question is, who's drinking that liquor? Is it you or is it somebody else? And truly, because because it makes a difference. So the Income Tax Act doesn't specifically address or restrict the purchase of liquor in the way that it specifically restricts other things like golf, for example, which is just not an allowable business expense. But all business expenses are subject to this kind of overarching reasonability test that exists in Section 18 of the Income Tax Act. And what that says is that all business expenses must be incurred for the purpose of generating income. And so that's not even just revenue, that's income. So if you're buying liquor and you're consuming it yourself, I think under audit you might have a difficult time supporting a position that that's a reasonable business expense. But what about employees, for example? So it's not uncommon for offices to offer small perks for employees, whether coffee in the office and treats, that sort of thing. Strictly speaking, those are taxable benefits to your employees. Now, CRA has long taken a position that they don't want to fight with business owners over these kind of idly-fiddly amounts. So strictly speaking, the CRA has taken a position of basically turning a blind eye to that. Now, whether you can have some beers in the fridge at the office so your employees can have a cold one on a Friday afternoon after a long week of work, I can't say. I think it would really come to whether what an auditor would accept under audit. But probably kind of more practically what this question is specifically getting to, I think, is can you buy liquor for a thank you gift for a referral partner, like a mortgage broker or a realtor or something like that? And again, I think if you're buying the odd bottle of wine for somebody as a thank you gift, I think you're probably okay. If you're buying liquor by the case, I think you'd have to have a pretty compelling argument as to how that is justifiable as a reasonable business expense. But in any event, it behooves you to have contemporaneous documentation. So have your receipts with the explanation of who you bought it for and why you bought it. And that way, if CRA comes knocking, then you at least have that. And then it really just comes down to whether an auditor would accept that on audit or not.
Excellent. All right, we're put compliance off to the side for a second, and we're going to shift into customer acquisition, growing the business, and we're going to focus on social media. So one of you have submitted this question around looking for cost-effective tips on how to focus social media on specific demographics and frankly in specific geographic areas. So we're going to spend a little bit of time now on social media. Maybe Mark, you can take this?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. So when it comes to targeting, this is a paid endeavor. So this is not going to be organic social media posts. So in order to target by demographics, we're going to need to set up ad accounts and get into advertising on social media for your business. So one of the main channels for 50 plus in particular is going to be Facebook. So Facebook has pretty excellent targeting capabilities. So by everybody's entering their information and being on Facebook, you can target specifically within your community. So you can put in, for example, 50 plus, male, female. You can target within your office, for example. So I would recommend, if you understand how far of a radius your customers are coming to your business. So you could target, for example, a 10-kilometer radius around your address, 25-kilometer radius, whatever sort of makes sense for your business. Another good channel would be LinkedIn. LinkedIn doesn't necessarily allow you to target by specific range, but they have an implied range based on people's seniority and things like that. So if you are on LinkedIn, you can set up LinkedIn ads around demographics as well. I would probably use Instagram selectively. Bit of a younger demographic, so if we're going for 50 plus, I think Facebook's the way to go. There's also a content component, so if you're advertising to prospective customers that are 50 plus, you want to publish content that is relevant to them. So we're going to be talking about wills and estates, power of attorney, downsizing real estate. So you're sort of understanding that demographic and some of their life needs. And then as far as content formats, short explainer videos, FAQs, things like that. And the biggest thing there is when it comes to ads, you don't need a huge budget. So, you could run an ad on Facebook, you're probably looking at, $5 to $10 a post, specifically targeted within your community. That'll definitely reach your desired target for sure.
Fantastic. Let's shift a little bit to securing new business and referrals. So referrals are often a very effective tool for potential customers to evaluate your service. And one of you have submitted a question around this, and it's on screen now. And it has a number of elements to it. One of them really is the value of referrals, in particular in competition of within a small town. And there's also some questions here around how do you secure those referrals from clients. So Mark, I'm wondering if you could get this one as well.
Yeah, so when it comes to referrals, and so using it as a growth engine, I think the biggest thing there is you need to design a system around it. So it is, asking for a referral can be uncomfortable. So I think the first thing we have to look at is sort of getting into a sort of a headspace around getting comfortable with asking for referrals. So, a lot of these can take place around specific, business moments that you're having with clients. So sort of after closings, signings, having that sort of relationship that you've sort of become comfortable with, and if it's a good transaction, there's an opportunity there to ask for a referral. I think one of the biggest things, and I think a lot of notaries I think are really good at this, is basically professional networks, because that's going to be a little bit easier when you build your relationship through realtors, mortgage brokers, etc. It's a little bit easier through that partnership for those people to refer your business. It's a lot easier than asking a customer when you're across from them face to face. That can still be pretty uncomfortable. The biggest thing with referrals as well, I think a missed opportunity is staying visible, really, right? So that could be through your social media channels, through public speaking. So a lot of that referral engine is driven by your presence, essentially, right? So, you're obviously meeting one-on-one with clients, but, whether it's networking, whether it's being out in the community, I think having that exposure just sort of creates a natural pathway to sort of start building referrals. And of course, I think the thing that goes without saying is, delivering memorable experiences to your customers. That to me, obviously, I think notaries do an excellent job in delivering their services, being part of their communities. So that part I think is a given, but the more active you are and the more sort of touch points you have with different people in the community, I think sort of paves a way for those referrals to start coming in.
That's fantastic. Just a follow-up question for me, Mark. Is Google Reviews the best format to direct your clients to do the referral, or is there other formats that you should consider?
Google reviews are, I mean, they provide social proof for sure. So, I mean, there was a specific question around Google reviews in small towns and do they matter? So I can address that. I mean, basically, if you are in a market where you have competitors, which basically every notary does. So even if I don't even know if there's any notaries that have no other notary competition in their region, but you're still gonna have lawyers as competitors. So I think it is important to have Google reviews, even in smaller markets. And an easy way to do that is basically, again, asking for a Google review is a lot easier than asking for a personal referral, for somebody to refer a friend or a family member. When it comes to Google reviews, you could have a link in your email footer that goes right to your Google business page. You could simply ask for reviews and just sort of let people know, how far a review could go into, getting somebody else to sort of recognize your business in your community. You could have a QR code at the front desk in your office where somebody can just scan that. You can sort of do those asks in monthly or quarterly newsletters. So I think it is a lower sort of touch point, an easier way to sort of get referrals through Google for sure.
Fantastic. So we're going to continue on the theme of building your business and growing your business. And we've got a question about asking about 3 of the best methods for increasing the businesses and how they contrast between sort of rural and urban environments. So Keith, I think you've had the opportunity to service the notary community here in BC and small law communities really across the country. I think you must have a very unique perspective in terms of how notaries and small law practices grow. I'm wondering if you could comment on this question.
Thanks, Pablo. I have been all over the province a few times. I'll address cities first. The challenge with cities is that they're crowded, in case you didn't notice. Random referrals don't scale. So what I would be doing if I was a notary in a larger urban centre, I'd be focusing on top producing realtors, mortgage brokers with consistent workflow. And what we're doing here is focusing on, I know this probably sounds obvious to you, but speed, reliability, communication, which of course that builds trust. I'd win on convenience, same day, next day appointments, and I do this by easy online bookings, and of course fast. That doesn't matter if you don't have a fast response to them. Clients generally choose the path of least resistance and the easiest option. What I'd also do, speaking about Google, is in the larger centres, is capture Google demand. Open up a Google business profile. You can search anything. You can jump into Google. I'm moving right now. So I was looking for a couch, as random as that sounds. But so you can punch in couches near me, and I have all these furniture outlet stores. What you want to be doing is when you punch into Google, find a notary near me, you want to be on that drop down. These clients have high intent, and they're looking to work with a notary yesterday. White space opportunities that I would see in this market would, so there are 3 things. Don't shoot the messenger. I've asked a lot of people. Faster access, less friction, that being the client experience, and find your niche. So what that looks like, the speed gap in 2026 hasn't been solved yet. Most offices, quite a lot of them, still operate on booking days in advance, and then there's slower response times to those bookings. So in dense cities, if you can do this speed thing, that sounds dodgy. If you can get a bit quicker, it can win business immediately. When it comes to less friction in the client experience, most notaries handle the transaction obviously, but it's somewhat fragmented. And I know everybody in this room is well aware that the clients remember how they felt. It's not the legal details, they don't care about registrations or the chaos that might be going on in the background. So have a clear process from booking to closing. This is a big one, is proactive updates. Everybody in here will know that you've got clients who are overly keen and they're updating you on how they're feeling about the world. You know, get ahead of that. It takes away a lot of your time, so having proactive updates gets ahead of that. And find your niche. So, all notaries do real estate, do wills, do notarizations, and everybody knows that because you tell everybody that you do that. But what I would say to differentiate yourself here is pick a lane and own that lane. So, if you had to pick a couple of things and said, we offer the fastest turnarounds, or we specialise in first-time home buyers, real estate investors, businesses and corporations, estate planning for young families. I think if you can really hone in on that, you'll build your business exponentially. You still with me?
All right, thank you, Keith.
I'm going to go into smaller communities. Sorry, Phil.
No, we're going to keep going with you, Keith.
Because I think some of the weird communities get forgotten about. So it's reputation. In my experience, going to a lot of the smaller communities in BC, reputation compounds much faster than marketing ever does. And I think sometimes in some of the weird markets that you try to emulate what they're doing in the bigger cities, and it's just, I believe that that's a mistake. So visibility speaks louder than ads ever will. And where I see the opportunity is modern convenience. There are still many offices, phone, email bookings, limited hours, and a manual intake. So start moving yourself to online bookings, same day again, next day appointments, an easy to follow process. Proactive estate planning. I'm going to say that till I'm blue in the face. It's underutilised. You're very good at it. And you're looked at as the experts in this field. Every notary says that they do them, but few, if any, promotes them consistently, or they position it as an ongoing planning mechanism. So the opportunity that I see lies in things like will check-up campaigns, bundling wills with power of attorneys, and wills and real estate clients, and lastly, partner with accountants, financial planners, financial advisors. And the very last thing I'll say for the smaller communities is this: be mobile. Get in your car. Most notaries in the smaller communities only service one town, with nearby communities having no one, or they have to travel. Don't be shy. I've spoke to a lot of you. You're not shy. Go and introduce yourself to these other wee towns. Visit care facilities, banks, credit unions. Have a satellite day where you take your office into these weird towns. In a smaller community, you can go from just being a notary in a single town to being a default notary in the region, and people remember your name, and I think that's really important to remember.
Excellent advice, Keith. Thank you so much. We're going to continue on the theme of growth. You know, sometimes some of the tactics that Keith just outlined are sort of hard to get done because you lack the sort of focus around driving towards that particular activity. Keith, do you have some counsel for notary practices around setting growth goals so that you can really drive progress around some of the tactics you just described?
Realistic, it's a tough one because what's realistic to one can be unrealistic to another, so it's somewhat subjective. But I put some typical ranges what you would want to be looking at. So the baseline would fall in the 5 to 10% a year, and that's with no big changes in pricing, referrals, or capacity. Mind you, if you don't move any of them, you're going to stay about 10% or under 10% growth. Healthy growth would be in the range of 10 to 20%, and an aggressive or happy days growth, as I like to call it, is 20 to 30% plus range. It's important to remember that market specs isn't real growth. Adding capacity moves the needle here without causing you to burn out or visit your therapist for the 8th time that week. So what you can do here is you can hire more staff, move to online booking, and use software. There's tons of software out there that helps streamline your files and make them flow a wee bit faster. And of course, adding more channels, like, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but realtor partnerships are huge, good ones, estate planning campaigns and bank partnerships. The real growth happens when you increase both these together. So obviously if you add capacity and you don't do anything with the channeling, you're going to have new business, you add capacity, you're going to be sitting around looking at one another, wondering where the business is, and then if there's more channels and not adding the capacity, obviously you're going to go, you're going to start burning yourself out. As you all know, it's a stressful and fast-paced environment. As far as tracking goes, I keep this really simple. My company loves Excel spreadsheets. I do not love Excel spreadsheets. But I think that would be the easiest way to track this. And the 4 things I would keep an eye on. How many new clients a month are coming in? If you look to target 10 to 20%, more people walking in the door. Keep an eye on the average revenue per file. How I would do that is I would look at it as if you're bundling your services. An increase in pricing. I would look to be doing this 5 to 15%. I know some people cringe when they think that, but you're experts in the field, and you shouldn't minimise that professionalism. Truly, you're worth every penny. And referral sources. Keep an eye on where your referrals are coming from. Mortgage brokers. It could be online. It could be past clients, and grow the top 3 consistently. And in capacity, how full is your calendar? Keep an eye on that. Anywhere between 75 and 90% should have appointment slots filled. If it's too full, you're going to end up burning out, and there's no real room for growth.
All right, guys. So with all that great advice, we've built a big practice. We've gotten lots of new customers, and now we're going to shift the conversation to capacity and employees and trends in terms of managing staff and best practices. And so Richard has the next set of questions. The first one is, does any employee retention trends that may be practical for a small employer in this challenging economy? So really, how do we keep and retain best talent? Over to you, Richard.
I think we can skip this. I don't see this being an issue. I don't hear about retention being a concern. No, I'm kidding. If I were to canvass the room, I suspect that 2/3 of us at least would say retention's an issue either from the employer's point of view, we may want to get rid of some people, or we don't know if we're going to stay with our existing employer in practice because we might have another opportunity further afield. It's a different world. I'm 47 years old, put it out there. And when I started in the working world, I was given a VHS cassette about OH&S stuff, and I was basically asked if I was bondable, whatever that meant when I was in my teens, and then I was put to task. And I got my paycheck, and that was it. It's a brand new world. I think we can all agree it's a different workforce out there that's coming out of school and joining our practices, and they have, like it or not, different needs and wants, and to some extent, I think, are bringing in really interesting points to the workplace. And so that leads to, well, how do we retain people in a different way? It's not anymore about a bonus check at the end of the year and incentivizing with money. At least in my experience over the last number of years, I'm finding that a bonus check does not get that commitment and drive and motivate your folks. And I don't know if that's resonating, but what I am finding is that respect is a touchstone. A lot of us have probably worked in a place that doesn't have a lot of respect, especially when we were in our younger years cutting our teeth. But employees these days want respect, and they want inclusion in decision making. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to steer the ship. And I think a lot of us who own businesses in this area think, I can't cede control. I can't give over important decision making to my staff. That's not what this is about. I think that retention, to really retain your folks, you should be including them in the discussion about big issues. We're thinking of pivoting to do more of this kind of work. And I'm hearing time and time again, when employees come in for legal assistance, if I had only been given respect at work on termination and the way that they treated me, I would never have been in this position, whether that's challenging the termination or looking at a contract with another employer before jumping from the one they're at. So you can see that those two things dovetail. They want respect, they want inclusion. I also, from a practical standpoint, find if you give people an extra week or two off of paid vacation or an incentive with a paid bit of time off or continuing education, that pays off in value much more than a $2,500 check at the end of the year. It's just something about, we value you and we recognize you want, and I'm seeing some nods and I appreciate that in my periphery, thank you. Because I think we can wrap our heads around this knowing that the workforce is changing. Continuing education is really important though. Help me be a better person, a more well-rounded person. Help me have work-life balance, whatever that means. Especially in practice, that can be tough to find. But they want that, and if we can support that with paid time off, go travel, take a course, do whatever, they'll be much more aligned with us as employers. And then be consistent. I think fair treatment and just consistency is really an expectation. I think there's more information online than ever before about employee rights, and they want to make sure that they're being treated fairly, but that they're being treated fairly in comparison to their peers, and that people aren't getting the proverbial sweetheart deal, or bad conduct by a high performer is overlooked because they draw revenue, and we can't really, we don't want to call John out because he's a high performer. No, the days of that are gone. They want an equal playing field. That's just some practical things that I find in my experience can really help retention.
That's great advice. I've heard from a lot of you some of the challenges of managing staff and securing staff. I'm curious, just by a show of hands, how many of you have some challenges in front of you around securing or engaging talent or retaining talent? See a show of hands? I'm just curious how big of an issue this is. All right. Very good. We're going to transition to now the flip side of that, which is talent which is maybe a little bit more marginal, that have performance issues, and how we choose to manage that situation. How do we let go of an employee that has attendance issues or unreliable in other ways? So Richard, I'm wondering if you could take that.
Thank you. So if I drone on here, I could talk about this all day, so somebody give me the hook if I'm talking too long. You have an employee who calls in sick frequently. I know it would never happen. I'm finding that I get this complaint a lot. Like, they're never accountable. They either come in late, I just couldn't get my kids out the door, or there's an ongoing maybe medical issue, or there's absenteeism that's leading to an unreliability. Okay, so the touchstone here, right off the hop, is Section 13 of the Human Rights Code. I'm not going to cite a bunch of law today, but that will be one that you should know about. It says we can't discriminate against people based on a whole host of things, including family status, so child care obligations, mental or physical disability, age, sexual orientation, like I said, a whole host of things. So we have a duty to inquire. If we're running a practice and we have employees, we have a duty not to just say, I suspect somebody, I suspect, I'm going to use John if that's okay as our hypothetical. I don't mean to offend anybody with that name. But John is calling in sick frequently. We can't just let him go because of unreliability. We have a duty to inquire. We have a duty to have a conversation and see if there's an accommodation necessary. What's going on with John's condition? Why are you coming in late frequently? Why are you not as reliable? And if it's in fact just, sorry boss, then hold John accountable and then think about a termination or a performance improvement plan. But we really ought to do that legwork at the outset to make sure we're not leading ourselves, unbeknownst to us, into a human rights complaint. Does that make sense? Yeah, because that's going to be a whole bunch of garbage you don't want to deal with from a time and liability point of view. but hold your folks accountable. It's really important. If you have a practice that opens at 9 and you go to 5 o'clock and you need somebody there the full time, well, John, these are the expectations. If you need medical time, then we can try to find accommodation for that, whatever that looks like, but you can't be in and out and variable. And so sometimes to get the information you need to go and consult with John's doctor with his consent to figure out what's going on in his life without intruding too much so that you can find an accommodation. That's where I think I should stop, or else we're in for another 30 to 40 minutes.
All right, Richard. Well, we're going to double down on this one more time on just one more angle. So one of the notaries here submitted a question around underperforming long-term employees. And how do you, some strategies to help manage those situations? So there's a number of examples listed here, including lack of accountability, misuse of IP, etc. So when there's a reoccurring theme with a long-term employee that needs to be addressed, maybe you could give the audience here some strategies to respond to that situation.
Yeah, I love this question, and I suspect that someone's dealing with a long-term employee who might be calling in sick frequently, but I'll leave that. But I think this is something that comes up often, and so I've got a few really, really key points about this. Long-term or not, you want to make sure that if you're going to be looking at someone's place in your organization, in your business, in your practice, and you're looking at off-boarding them, nice phrase for firing, you'll likely have to do it without cause, which means you have to give notice or pay in lieu. You don't want to have unnecessary liability, so the starting point is to have a good contract that says, in the event that we dismiss you without cause, you will only receive, and I generally like to start with employment standards because it's the floor, but you can go above that. And I don't practice by fear, but here's why we do that. If you don't have a contract for this long-term employee that's unreliable and you want to get rid of them, and I don't mean to be flip and crass, but you want to terminate, you want to end the relationship, then you will owe them something between 0 and 24 months. That is the upper limit of reasonable notice in Canada. And it's based on age, length of employment, John's role, and the availability of comparable employment in the geographic region where he lives. Maybe he'll get snapped up quickly, and that might minimize your damages, but you could have avoided it all with a contract. So that's the first thing, is set yourself up for success in the event that we do have to end relationships. And think about what notice John has to give if he's going to leave too. Second thing, hold him accountable. I was just talking a minute ago about the Human Rights Code and discrimination. It's not discrimination if you're holding people accountable to the bona fide occupational requirements, the true characteristics of the job, the tasks that need to be done. Most of us hate this, what I'm going to say next, but put together a job description if you can. I know some of it might seem mundane. We all know what we do, but if you can put your mind to coming up with a 10-item list of these are the fundamental things I need out of you, John, down the road, if he's not meeting those requirements, that provides an objective assessment tool for you to use. And then you're on better footing to dismiss. And then proactive discipline. So if you don't want to offboard John, then I think it's really important that you be transparent with him. Another thing that, by the way, the newer workforce is really looking forward to or expecting are more frequent check-ins. The age-old days of this is your annual performance review. It seems to have come up so fast. Can't believe it's April already. Those days are gone, so if you could do quarterly or every 6-month reviews, that's really great, if not more informal check-ins. People expect it, but also that holds people accountable. You'll check issues before they become out of control, and then if you need to, issue discipline. Do it in writing if it's a serious issue. And that will set the framework for you to have an easier time to offboard down the road. I hope there's some practicality in all of that, but I think the severance piece is really important, and then proactive management. Yeah, that's how I would be looking at John's situation in this example.
That's fantastic.
Poor John. He is having a day.
Very practical advice. Thank you. We're going to shift back to tax planning and tax strategies. And so, Jeremy, I'm wondering if you can tell the audience here about any new tax credits or maybe some existing tax credits that are underutilized that notaries should be aware of as they consider their tax planning and tax filing.
So the question there was about 2026, and so I think we first need to kind of make a distinction between, are we talking the 2026 taxation year, or are we talking about the 2026 tax season? So in other words, the time that we're in now preparing taxes for last year. So obviously we're only just in the 2026 taxation year, and nobody knows what the future holds. So I can't speak to what might be coming, but as far as what was new in 2025, the short answer is kind of nothing. And the reason is, the provincial government had a $13 billion budget deficit. The federal government had a $78 billion hole in their budget. So neither level of government is really in a position where they can offer any sort of meaningful tax relief to taxpayers. That said, I think the most kind of noteworthy change, if you will, in 2025 is at the provincial level, the provincial government increased the rate on the lowest marginal tax bracket by 54 basis points. So it went up from 5.06% to 5.6%. In contrast, the federal government actually decreased the rate on the lowest marginal tax bracket by 1%. Now they did that in mid-2025. So basically what that means is that the effective rate went from 15% to 14.5%, and then it won't be until 2026 when we actually realize kind of the full impact of that. And so we all pay tax at those lowest marginal tax rates to some degree or another. So we're all affected to some degree, albeit it's a pretty small change, but that's really kind of the only noteworthy one for this year.
Excellent. So let's take a bit of a step back around tax planning. Do you have some advice around broad tax planning strategies that notaries should consider as they choose to implement strategies to reduce liability and maximize their incomes?
So I can't really speak to liability because that's obviously more of a legal question. But from a tax question, I think this is really kind of getting to that age-old question of should I incorporate or not? And so for notaries, there's kind of two structures that you can operate under. One is as a sole proprietor. The other, of course, is as a corporation. Now, I think we all know when you're a sole proprietor, there is no legal separation between you and your business. You are the business. So any tax planning opportunities that exist for sole proprietors are very much limited to what would be available for any other kind of individual taxpayer. That said, where there is sort of an advantage, if you will, of being a sole proprietor over a corporation is with respect to losses. Now, hopefully nobody in the room is operating your notary practice at a loss, but to the extent that you have other non-capital losses from other sources of income, those can potentially be set off against the income that you earn through your notary practice. So where we might see that is, for example, if you've got an income-producing property, an investment property, and if you can structure that in such a way that it's creating a loss, so for example, if you can kind of lever that up so that between the interest expenses and the operating expenses, it's generating a loss. And it kind of doesn't matter in that circumstance what you use the funds for if you lever it, but if you can create a situation where it's operating at a loss, you can potentially set those non-capital losses off against your other sources of income. When it comes to a corporation, the ability to use losses are much more restricted because they're trapped in the corporation. So then it kind of comes down to the question of, when is it advantageous other than that to incorporate? And to understand that, you first need to kind of understand one of the fundamental principles of the income tax system, and I won't get too much into the weeds, but suffice it to say that the income tax system in Canada is based on this concept of integration. And what that means is, as a matter of policy, the government wants individual taxpayers at the end of the day to be indifferent as to how you earn different sources of income. So whether you earn that income as a sole proprietor, or whether you take dividends through a corporation that you own and control, whether you take a salary through an arm's length corporation or a corporation that you own, at the end of the day, the government wants you to be indifferent as to your individual tax bill. So where the advantage of incorporating can come from is, as individuals, I think we all understand that we're subject to these graduated marginal tax rates that I've been talking about. Corporations only pay tax at kind of one of two rates. And for everybody in the room here, you're probably going to be at that lower small business deduction rate, which is 11% in British Columbia. So where there's sort of an opportunity for tax planning with a corporation is if you don't need all the income that your corporation earns, you can leave some of that income behind in the corporation. It gets taxed at that lower 11% rate. And then if at some point in the future you want to take that out when you're earning lower income and you're in a lower income tax bracket, then what you're kind of doing is temporally over time, reducing your overall tax burden. Now the other potential advantage of incorporating is with respect to income splitting. So the government has really kind of restricted that over the last decade or so, but to the extent that maybe you've got a spouse or a partner who's to some degree involved in your business, then you may be able to do some income splitting, either by paying them a salary or by doing what we call dividend sprinkling. And basically what that means is, we would issue different classes of shares to you and your spouse, and then we can be kind of strategic as to how we pay dividends. So maybe in 1 year, you've got high enough income from other sources that you don't need to take the dividends, but you want to pay one to your spouse. Or to the contrary, if you don't want to pay one to your spouse, but you want to take one, it gives you that flexibility to do that. And then basically what you're doing is kind of within your family unit, reducing your overall tax burden. Now, suffice it to say that those income splitting rules, they're called TOSI, tax on split income. They are spectacularly complicated. So if this is of interest to you, please don't go out and act on what I just said. You really need to get an accountant who knows what they're doing with this and who understands your situation so they can advise you on it. Because if you run afoul of those, the implications are quite punitive.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to get back on the theme of sales and marketing, and the next question is around common marketing mistakes. So, Mark, I'm wondering if you can comment a little bit about some of the mistakes that you see that prevent small practices from standing out.
Sure. Well, I think one of the biggest mistakes is sort of lack of differentiation. So basically blending in, right? So blending in the case of building your practice and marketing is not a good thing. So differentiation is a big one. Same tone, same messaging, sort of same communication style as your competitors. I think the biggest thing here, the legal industry, being regulated, I don't want to use the word boring, but I think people have a preconceived notion that that you need to sort of behave a certain way. So obviously, you're going to need to be professional and all those things. But I think there's a huge opportunity to embrace your personality in your marketing, right? And that's part of your brand. So there's definitely, I've come across a number of notaries that are doing this quite successfully. So the thing is, again, you have to balance your own personality with, if you're not an extrovert, of course, I understand that's a challenge in putting yourself out there. But everybody has a unique personality, and I think incorporating that into your branding and into your marketing, I think is a huge opportunity. Another one is around services, right? So I think what a lot of notaries do is they list services. It's very transactional. So I think there's an opportunity to get a little deeper in what problems those services address, right? So more sort of personal storytelling in your marketing and your communication around the impacts of those services. Wills is one, estate planning, so peace of mind, these kind of life messages that are important to people, right? So it's not, the will is the transaction, right? But what is that will, I have 3 kids. We've had a will for 20 years now. it's how that will makes me feel, right? And that's what you need to tap into is your customers' personal feelings around these services, right? Estate planning, even travel stuff, travel documents, right? There's a lot of stress around potentially, people going on a trip that need certain documentation, right? So there's lots of things where you can address those pain points. And another common mistake is consistency. So creating content, creating messaging, doing marketing is, it's time intensive, right? You guys are running practices, you're busy. So what I see a lot of is start and stop. Sort of you have some time, you do some stuff, and then you take 4 months off, and then you start publishing some more stuff. So I think consistently communicating with the market, right? So whatever that cadence is for you, it doesn't have to be daily. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly. Whether that's a quarterly newsletter, a monthly newsletter, whether that's publishing on social media once a week. The biggest thing is to be consistent and be out there. And whether that could be the same for more sort of bricks and mortar kind of philosophies, more traditional marketing where, if you're doing public speaking or things like that, where you're in the community on a regular basis. And the last point is having a lack of a follow-up system, right? So, all of your customers have a lifetime value. I know that personally. Like, I've been dealing with the same notary for 20 years, right? So that's a lot of revenue over time. So I think it's important to stay connected with those customers in a way that's not super intrusive, whether that's just through updates. I think email is a really good one. I think email marketing, it's sort of old school, but it is very effective. People still have email addresses. And if you can get a permission-based email program going where you can just update people, stuff going around the office, new things that are, new policies or new regulations that are out, strategies. So just, being in front of those customers in a soft way gives you that sort of connection to stretch out the value of that customer, over the lifespan of that relationship.
Do you recommend that people call and just get in touch with clients to ask if they need probate yet? Like anything like that? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
But it's a good question. But I mean, I think being proactive.
Are we ready yet? Let's get that will.
I think being proactive is important, right? I mean, I think, understanding where your customers are sort of in the product life cycle and the service life cycle, right? So really staying connected with somebody that, you start off as a new home buyer, right? For, let's say somebody's 35, they just bought their first house, you did that real estate transaction. Sort of having a system in the back end that helps send out information along that cycle. Maybe not straight up asking, but, prompting content that would get people thinking about the next phase of their life and the next thing that they need from a notary, basically. Yeah, no worries, that was good.
Excellent question. The next question is around AI.
Oh yes, AI.
Not a huge surprise. And the question was really around how to use AI to help grow the practice. I'm going to direct this first to Keith, but I'm very happy if Mark or anyone else wants to jump in here. It's obviously a very timely topic.
Well,
Yeah, I can jump in first.
yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, AI, there's a couple things. There's the standard things with AI that once you get good at writing prompts, AI can be in a very effective way to become more efficient in creating content, basically, right? So one of the biggest things about marketing communication, whether that's writing a blog, having a newsletter, writing social media posts, it takes time to write that content. So one of the biggest things that AI can help with is, helping you come up with a marketing plan, helping you write actual content, right? And the beauty about being a notary and a professional is you can vet that content on the spot, right? So AI is getting a lot better compared to a year ago. I wouldn't necessarily trust what it generates from a legal perspective, but you are your own. You know your regulations. You know what what that content should look like, right? So you can basically, if you write a good prompt, a prompt is basically what you're asking AI to create. It could write 1,000-word blog post on a specific topic for you in 30 seconds, basically, right? And then you can basically then take that document, personalize it. I wouldn't recommend just throwing it out onto your website. Obviously, you want to review it, personalize it. So that's one thing, is just creating content. The next big thing with AI is going to be sort of website optimization. So some of you might be familiar with SEO, or search engine optimization. So that's basically getting your website, with keywords and certain things where if somebody Googles or somebody puts in a search in Google, the goal is that your website would come up on the first page based on the content that's delivering to that person searching. Well, what's happening now is people are using AI engines for search, basically. So it's starting to replace channels like Google. And even if you go to Google, usually the first result that comes up is Google's AI result, right? So again, I'm not a website developer, but the way your site is structured, and I would definitely recommend talking to a developer, because what's happening now is AI is, when it delivers a piece of content, right? So let's say somebody asks a question, or a legal question that a notary can a service that corresponds with that. Often it will cite the reference, right? So really what you want there is you want to be the reference, right? So not only people going in search engines looking for your product, but you want essentially, when somebody's in AI, when it references something to do with a notary service, it has an opportunity to basically have your business there, right? So I would, highly recommend talking to a developer about that, because there is some coding stuff in there. And again, I'm not a professional in that area, but it's the way your site is structured. It's more simplistic language. It has some parallels with what search engine optimization does. But I think that's sort of the next wave, because I think, I know a lot of people that just basically use ChatGPT for search now, and they don't even use Google, right? So that is sort of, I think, the next phase as far as how AI can assist. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's very useful. I know you're all probably a lot like me, that you use some of these tools on a daily basis for sort of personal use cases. I'm wondering, I would like to see a show of hands again around the use of AI, any use of AI within your practice. How many folks here have used it, even just experimented in terms of use of AI in their practice? Wow, that's excellent. Fantastic. Yes?
Sorry, just in terms of that, not from a marketing standpoint, but I just thought, we as practitioners, we obviously are we're in a brand new world, and so we're looking at ways to integrate AI, I think, into practice for development of documents and things like that, right? So just two really quick things. You hear these cases come down the pipe where somebody submits something to the court, or a document is reviewed and it clearly has hallucinated sites or something like that. So I recommend having a policy about AI use for your notaries in your office. I recommend that it also say, you can use AI, but only one of these tools, and I'll get to that in a second, but get tools that you're comfortable with, 1 or 2 or 3, and that they always have to review it with their human eyeballs and judgment at the end. And then number 3, just as a really quick practical thing, I recommend you look at closed system AI. So it's not, when you feed it information like your precedent bank for your conveyancing documents or what have you, it's not going out into the ether past your server. You want to make sure that you're educating it with your tools, but that it's staying in your system. And then client confidentiality is obviously and also protected. I just thought I'd mention that.
Excellent advice there. We're now going to go excuse me, back to the theme of referrals. And again, Mark, I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more perspective on how we really translate client referrals into revenue growth and consistent revenue growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think we addressed that in the first sort of set of questions, but again, really what it comes down to, I think, is building a system, and just being intentional and proactive about, using those referrals. Again, through your networks, through, again, when we talked about the marketing mistakes, for example, and not sort of, having consistency around communication, I think the referral engine piece it falls into that category where, if you have a system in place where you're communicating with your customers on a regular basis or your prospects, it makes it easier to insert referral messaging as opposed to sort of, you're not really communicating on a regular basis with your clients or your prospects, and then you go on and start asking for referrals, right? It's awkward, right? So, having that system in place just with your communication in general, I think opens the referral path, and it just makes it a lot easier to request those referrals.
Fantastic. We started this session by talking a little bit about driving a profitable business and managing a business, and we've talked a fair bit about growing revenue. So Keith, I'm wondering if you could give us some thoughts around how you can grow revenue without really adding a great deal of administrative burden.
Such a good question. If you find out, you can tell me. But I'll put some thoughts together here. I think a common misconception for a notary is thinking that you're actually growing by doing more files all the time. But the problem with that is that your admin explodes. I think the smarter path is a couple of things. So one, if you look to earn more per file, and reduce touches per file, which is a really big one. And the three ways that you can optimize this that I've put together are increased revenue per client, obviously without doing more work. That sounds wonderful. And you would do this by bundling services, real estate clients with offering wills, power of attorneys, other legal documents, and you do this at closing. One thing that you might not be focused on is adding small, high margin add-ons like fast turnaround times, quite a quick closing. You add a premium to that costs money. Travel consent for the wee ones, for the children. You'll get this at more at holiday season. And stat decks and certified copies. These take minutes to do. So it's essentially just pure margin. You would keep administration low by offering add-ons at one moment, not multiple points across the transaction. And just have a simple checklist to keep it consistent. Understand that every file isn't necessarily the same. There's nuances, but I think if you find that you've got a repeatable process, you're going to see that area grow. When it comes to the small add-ons, you're not creating more work. This is adjacent to the client that's already sitting in front of you. Big win here is reducing administration per file. Most notaries, I believe, strongly, lose time in back and forth emails, incomplete documents, and unclear client instructions. So how I would fix it if I was smart enough to be a notary, I'd have clients submit absolutely everything, including their dog, up front. Standardize your templates. Emails are the same, process is the same, consistent, a repeatable process. An online booking with auto reminders. It works like a charm. If you do this right, I think the time savings here can scale your business massively. And lastly, upgrade your referral quality. Now, I spoke about hooking up with your business to realtors and mortgage brokers earlier. But more clients doesn't necessarily equate to better business. Good referral partners send prepared clients, and prepared clients means fewer emails, fewer surprises, and fewer delays. You're essentially reducing your admin, while increasing the throughput. And by the way, when you look at realtors that are doing a banging business out there, it's still got to align with your business. Maybe they don't work in your community. Maybe it doesn't align with your price point. But look at their reviews as well. It's important because it's going to be a reflection of you. Clients don't look at a transaction as it being siloed. You're all in this boat together, and while you're project managing it most of the time, the experience is everything.
Thank you, Keith. We're going to continue with you a little bit more. The next question is really about how to introduce a new service line in your notary practice, really focusing around giving a new service line to your existing customers. And I think the example here was wills. So what kind of capacity is needed, and what kind of tactics are required to introduce that new service to existing clients?
Introducing new wills is a service. Well, first off, and this might be a wee bit contentious, but I wouldn't position it as a new service. I think first and foremost, as human beings, that's what we want to do, and that's what we go to, and that's how it's always been. But the problem is that it sounds salesy. Trust me, I know. Well, it may be a new service to you. Wills aren't new, so it could come across as you not being up to date, or even worse, not being as thorough when you met them the first time. So I would be careful with that. I've never been a fan of emails. I know you were speaking about this earlier. Anybody that knows me knows that I absolutely hate emails unless they're pre-scheduled. So unless your customer knows that they're coming, like this is where the deal's at and what have you. But unless you can write how you speak, and for that you needed a trusted relationship, when it comes to wills as a new service, do not do it. You're not going to get any traction. I absolutely promise you this. I don't think this. If I were a notary and I was looking at wills as a new service, I'd be on the phone. It's the best approach. I know it sounds strange in 2026, but that is by far the best approach. And if it were me, and I put a couple of things down here, and I'd come from a place of something like this. I'm not going to kill John because he's had a brutal day, so I'm going to go with Mary. Although I did have John down here. So it would look something like, hi Mary, it's Keith, how are you? Blah, 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 blah. Fantastic, great to hear, Mary. And John, how's he doing? All the things, bedlam. Fantastic, wonderful. Listen, Mary, I'm just doing my quarterly review. By the way, it just looks something like this. I put it together, so don't judge. Mary, I'm just doing my quarterly review, and I've just learned we don't have a will in file. What do you have in place to protect your assets and ensure your wishes are carried out in your passing? And then don't talk. I think one of the things that we do when we're trying to offer a service is we're trying to shove it down people's throats and trying to help them get there. And that's really, really salesy. Let them talk. They trust you. You're their advisors. And in a lot of the relationship, you're friends in many ways. So let them get to there. And from that point, they can be coming in, and then you can move to do whatever it is you need to do when it comes to a will. Don't sell a service. You are everything. You're the product. It's you. If you believe in wills, which I have to assume you do, a client that trusts you will sit with you. If you position this as advising them in their financial well-being and overall ensuring that their estate is well taken care of. Here's the caveat to it. If you call and there's no answer, just leave a message to call you. Don't blab on that you've got a new service to sell, please. Don't tell me you've got a will to talk to them about. Just leave your name. They know who you are. They will 100% call you because they'll think something's wrong, and then you can just have that conversation. I promise you, it's 100% of the time this works. That's funny enough how I met Daniel Blavel the first time. I never told him where I was from. I just said my name and he called me back. I'd urge you to include, though, the will conversations in any new client, with new clients as part of your process. Do it at the front end. You're not going to have a conversation with Mary later on down the road.
All right. That's some provocative advice there. Thank you. We're going to shift back into employment-related issues and really focusing around how we can effectively manage Gen Z, and really around the employers finding information to help them do that management. So the question here is, where can employers find practical resources beyond the sort of obvious government websites to help manage Gen Zs? So Richard, would you like to take this?
Absolutely, and I broke this question down into two separate sections. I was thinking about what resources what I'd recommend that employers sign up to, or where they can find materials, which will include dealing with various levels of various strata of your workforce, including Gen Zs, and Gen Zs, whatever, and then Boomers, and everywhere in between. First of all, there's a free service that has all the legislation on it called canli.org, CANLII.org, which you may be very well aware of. That's a great one for legislation. But other than that, I think, not to be salesy, but we will all likely, we're here presenting because we see value in being thought leaders and being out there and helping the community and providing input like this. A lot of organizations like us will have blogs. You don't have to do a thing. You find practitioners you trust, whether it's your accountant or tax advisor, your sales and marketing folks. Sign on to their materials and get them monthly, quarterly, or however you need, and take advantage of them. Like, I know our firm has employer huddles where it's a complimentary webinar for employer clients. There's stuff available. Just find someone you jive with or already have a relationship with and sign up for their list. And that's the best way to stay apprised of updates. And it's mutually beneficial, but it will keep you up to date on things. And then WorkSafe BC has one that you can sign up for. Not the best, but it will keep you up to date if you want to make sure that you're doing everything from a regulatory perspective internally. Gen Zs. What do we do? I'm kidding. But this is, it's a different world, and it's a different expectations from our workforce. And so there were a few things that in thinking about this I wanted to raise. Number one is already make sure we're going into those relationships respectfully. Ageism is an act of discrimination under the Human Rights Code, so we have to be very careful of that. It's the same thing that led to getting away from mandatory retirement. We can't discriminate based on age. What we can discriminate against people on the basis of, which is a weird way to frame it, is the bona fide occupational requirements. So there's two things wrapped up in dealing with any generation in our workforce. Find out what motivates them, number one, and we already talked about that. And then number two, hold them to account. And so again, I go back to that discussion we had earlier about having a job description. And that will be entirely unrelated to age. It's an objective assessment of what you need done. That's going to be your starting point. Beyond that, recognize the things that we talked about in terms of regular check-ins, discussion. They need to feel integrated into the workforce. They want to have their lives, and they want to also work. And that's maybe different than a lot of us that grew up to develop mastery in a practice. And Gladwell says 10,000 hours to develop mastery. That's roughly 5 years of practice, right? At least that's what we find in the pure practice of workplace law. That's not always the case these days, and maybe that's okay. Maybe people can get there, and it doesn't have to be a 5-year trajectory because they have other interests and other things. It's a different world. Try to be as understanding as you can to where they're coming from. They're going to bring in a whole bunch of technological tools and a whole bunch of things that we may not have at our fingertips, and I say we, pointing inward. I may not be aware of the next great technological tool that could take our practice to the next level, so listening and then including them in the conversation will help them feel recognized and as stakeholders in the business, but it will help to also keep me apprised of what's happening, because they're also a representative of what's what the community is that I'm serving. So there's an interesting back and forth in that regard as well.
Fantastic. Do we have some more?
I have many points. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just double checking. Mutual respect, and focus on experience, not age. So if you are going to make distinctions, and I'm sorry, Pablo, that was just the last point here. If you're going to be holding your Gen Zs to account, and just like any generation in your workforce, make sure you're focusing on experience. So if they're not as experienced because they just got out of school a year ago, focus on experience, not you're so young you don't know It's a sleight of hand a little bit. It's semantic. But if we focus on experience on the job as opposed to age, that also helps to parse things out and keep true accountability. I hope that makes sense, but we can talk later about that if not.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. So we're almost out of time. We have just a couple more questions. So Jeremy, maybe we can address the next two. Both of them relate to deductions. The next one is commonly missed deductions that notaries aren't taking advantage of. And the next one is really around charitable deductions to maximize business deductions.
So the first thing I guess I would say about the missing of deductions is don't let what I said earlier about anti-avoidance provisions and aggressive tax positions dissuade you from taking or make you fearful of taking genuine expenses and deductions for income tax purposes. And part of the reason I say that is sometimes I encounter clients in my practice who are somewhat reluctant to take genuine deductions for things like mileage for business travel for fear that it'll attract CRA's attention. And maybe it will, but you don't want to leave anything on the table, right? It behooves you to have that contemporaneous documentation to support that position. Something else, a cautionary word I want to pick up on that AI question. So, I know enough about AI to be dangerous, but if the inputs from AI come from kind of the most common sources, and those sources are more populous areas, then if you are Googling this sort of thing or putting it into AI, you do run the risk of getting information from the US tax code or something like that. So a cautionary word on that. As far as common expenses go, medical expenses is a good area where there's some opportunity for tax planning. So you can pool your medical expenses with your spouse, which means we can make a distinction as to whose tax return it's more advantageous to claim those credits on. Medical expenses can also be claimed for any 12-month period that ends in the current taxation year. So that gives us some kind of flexibility to be a little bit strategic as to the timing of when we utilize those medical expenses. Donations are another area where you can pool them with your spouse, so we can be kind of strategic as to which return we claim those on. If you're of the demographic where you can take advantage of the pension splitting rules, then that's an opportunity. And then I think another one that a lot of sole proprietors aren't aware of is with respect to premiums on extended healthcare plans. So I keep talking about medical expenses. Medical expenses on a personal income tax return, you get a credit against a portion of that expense that you paid out as a credit against your taxes payable. If you have a corporation and you pay premiums for extended healthcare plans for your employees, those are 100% deductible. What a lot of sole proprietors don't know is that if you offer an extended healthcare plan as a sole proprietor, irrespective of how many employees you have, provided that you meet certain criteria, you can deduct the full amount of that as if you were a corporation, as opposed to just getting a portion of that by way of credit. And then I think the other question was about maximizing donations. So it's a bit of a contradictory question, right? Because by definition, a donation is you voluntarily giving up something of value for nothing in return. So if you're looking for a way to get value back, then you really run the risk of running afoul of the advantage rules, which basically say if you receive some sort of economic advantage in return for a donation, that's going to grind or reduce the amount of the donation that you're eligible to utilize. From there, if you have a corporation, then there's a bit of kind of a strategic question as to where we would utilize those donations, whether you want to make them as an individual or whether you want to make them through your corporation. So if you make a donation as an individual, you're going to make those with after-tax dollars. When you do that, you will get a credit back against your taxes payable. For donations over $200, that's 29%. So let's say you make a donation of $1,000 with after-tax dollars, you're going to get a credit back against your taxes payable of $290. If you make that same donation through a corporation, that's going to be with pre-tax dollars. But as I said earlier, the tax rate for corporations, small businesses, is 11%. So on that same $1,000 that's with pre-tax dollars, you're going to get about $110 back. So at the outset, 29% sounds kind of pretty appealing, but you're getting that on after-tax dollars. So it really kind of comes down to doing a bit of an analysis and saying which direction is kind of most tax efficient. And then from there, I think it really kind of comes down to a strategic question that if you can't get anything in return, then how do you maximize those donations to get your name out there and your brand awareness out there in order to kind of maximize that exposure? And that's probably more a question for Keith or Mark or one of the other panelists, I would think.
All right, thank you so much. Well, guys, I think we have run out of time. You can hear the passion among the panelists, and I think we could go on for another couple of hours on these topics. If any of you are interested in discussing any of these things further, really welcome afterwards to speak to any of the panelists. I think it's particularly appropriate that we sort of started off this learning journey together, focusing on driving the business side of notaries, because it's often neglected, but it's very important. I'm wondering if you could all give the panelists a round of applause for this session.
Thanks, guys, for your expert knowledge. We appreciate you taking the time. There's a gift as you walk off the stage. We'll move into a coffee break and back at 11 a.m. for an LTSA update. Thanks, everyone.